I think that life is full of opportunities, regardless of what you end up doing. I mean, I decided not to continue in research, but I learned a lot of things from that research, both from the field itself and what AI was at the time, but also what it means to be a researcher, what it means to really work on something for years and try to go really, really deep into a topic, which gave me a lot of self-assurance that I would be able to do that on other topics and understand very complex things.
Welcome to the Regulating AI Podcast with Sanjay Puri. AI is changing the world faster than rules can keep up. So how do we protect people without killing progress? Each week, Sanjay brings you inside conversations with global leaders, policymakers, and innovators who are wrestling with that exact question. So if you're curious about the future of technology and how it's governed, you're in the right place. Anne Bouverot is one of Europe's most influential voices on AI governance and cybersecurity. Former chair of the EU Agency for Cybersecurity, she's helped shape how governments regulate powerful technologies at scale. In this episode, she cuts through the hype to reveal what responsible AI regulation really takes and where the biggest risks lie if we get it wrong.
And welcome to Regulating AI. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
You, as I mentioned, got your PhD in 1991. We are not trying to date you because I also, at that time, was working on mine. But this was during a time where researchers called this second AI winter. And I can tell you it was very cold at that time. For me coming, doing PhD at that time, what was the actual title of your thesis? And if you handed it to a Mistral AI researcher today, would any of it be relevant, or would they look at it and say, what have you written about alchemy or something of that nature?
Maybe more alchemy. I mean, it was about how to, the goal, I think, was very relevant. It was how do you automatically generate a program, a code from the specifications, so what you want it to do, which is something that today's AI does quite well. A number of the AI models are quite good at that for small pieces of code, but it was the theoretical research into that. Of course, it was pre-transformers and pre-large language models, so it is completely outdated today. But when I think back of that, it brings me back to something that's actually very relevant today, which is how do you verify a program or prove that it does what you want it to do?
But in 1991, and you concluded, like some other people, that AI wouldn't matter anytime soon, and you pivoted to telecom. Walk our audience through that decision and what specifically convinced you that AI was a dead end. Because what are the lessons for today's researchers? Some of them are making similar thoughts or similar conclusions.
It was more for me, I wanted something with more short-term applications, and certainly the short-term applications and the more of the pace that I found in a business setting when I moved to telecoms was what I was looking for. So I guess when you thinking back, when you're at that type of time in your career after your studies, you wonder what to do. It's important to think about whether research is what you enjoy, with all the implications of that, or whether you want to do go in a different direction, which is what I decided to do at the time. But those are always very interesting moments for anyone faced with a similar decision.
So, and you had the distinction of witnessing AI's second winter and also the mobile revolution. And now you see the Gen AI or the large language model explosion. For our listeners who are trying to figure it out, what patterns do you see that people who have only experienced, let's say, the current hype might miss? Are we in another bubble? Because that's a big question that's happening right now. Or is this a genuine transformation or something else completely, Anne?
It's a very good question. I think it is a genuine transformation. It is a massive disruption. Clearly, it enables things that that were not possible before. At the same time, it's worth thinking back even further back in time, in the 1950s, when the term artificial intelligence was coined. So neither you nor I were born at the time, but that idea that maybe one day computer science and computers would take over from humans, that idea was already there at the time, with people thinking about how to decide what the moment would be when that happened, and whether that was going to be pretty soon after the 1950s. So this idea that we want to compare human intelligence to computers has always been there. Interestingly, it didn't materialize anytime soon after the 1950s nor the 1990s, and it's not there yet. So that's something for us to ponder. And in terms of a bubble, I think financially, there's a number of indicators that could say this might be a bubble. And if you've invested in AI stock, I think that's a very relevant question. But regardless of that, AI is already changing the way we interact with each other outside of work, the way people learn, especially at school, but throughout our careers as well. So the transformation is real.
We went through internet, we went through the cloud. How do you compare some of those with what is happening right now? Is it much more transformative, or would you put it in the same category?
Definitely, it's happening way faster than the previous revolutions. That's a general trend that we see with technological revolutions and new services. The number of people that are already using generative AI around the world, that's massive. And it's only 3 years ago that the first publicly accessible models were made available, about exactly 3 years ago. And it is transformative, but then we tend to forget the things that were transformative for us in the past. Young people today couldn't imagine life without a smartphone. I remember when smartphones arrived, when the iPhones, which were not the very first from a technical perspective, but the ones that really took the world in a sizable way, that was 2007. And that's not that long ago. My kids were born. So it is similar to some others revolutions. It's faster. It's maybe a bit similar to the internet revolution, where there was a lot of buildup, and not everything in internet and broadband, and not everything was used immediately, but then it became a massive trend. We still have lots to discover, but we've seen some precedents as well.
So it's faster, and which is true, tend to forget the past transformations, because we'll all live in the current moment, especially given social media and everything else. And you talked about smartphones, and at GSMA, the organization, you coordinated over 800 mobile operators across 219 countries towards common standards, like mobile payments, interoperability, and things of that nature. What specific diplomatic mechanisms from that experience are you now applying to AI governance, and which mechanisms don't transfer at all? Because, as you know, AI governance within countries, within companies, is a big challenge. So tell our listeners, especially policy leaders, about your experiences.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And it's actually something that I really enjoy, because this is, in a way, technological diplomacy. So the part that is very similar to general diplomacy is that it is about people, and it is about understanding where people come from, who they represent, and what their environment and what their constraints and what their goals are. If they represent a country or a region, you need to know that. If they have particular constituents, you need to understand that. So there's a very human and cultural element to that. And at the same time, it's a technology. I mean, both mobile and today AI, it's very technical. It's very scientific. It's very precise. There are things that are right and things that are wrong and things that work and things that don't work. So you need to understand the technology piece and be credible when you discuss that. But when you do that, actually, I find that it helps bring together a way forward, be that to define a standard or be that to find any type of agreement, because you're not only debating emotions and different perspective, you're also able to get around the table and say, well, let's agree how we measure that, why we measure it. Maybe let's not set a rule or a threshold, but let's at least start with the measurement and the agreement. And in this way, you can make some progress, I believe. There's not a set recipe, but it's this combination that I find so really interesting.
So your technical diplomacy led the mobile industry from a fragmented national standards to global interoperability. And is that path possible or even desirable for AI models be interoperable, or is that fundamentally a different challenge in AI versus telecom?
It is very different from a technological perspective. There are lessons that you can learn. You do want the technology to work in different countries and for everyone, but of course, in different ways for different use cases. So you will not use AI for a critical application in the same way as you use it just for a chatbot conversation. And even when you talk about the chatbot conversation, then it's about who has access to it, how this works for children, for example, versus adults and things like that. And then you also have what governments want or don't want to do. Clearly, China, for example, wants to have its own national ecosystem with different versions that even predates AI, with different versions, for example, of social media apps. The TikTok app is from the perspective of China, is the international app. The Chinese version has a different name, Douyin, and actually functions in a different way. It always surprises people, but Douyin is a very nice, children-friendly, very geared towards bringing information about science and education, very different to the social media app that we know in other countries. So like China, some countries might want to have their own ecosystem, and whether that works or not, that's something to clearly be followed carefully and watched.
At GSMA, you must have surely encountered situations where consensus building would have failed, where sometimes operators couldn't agree. What did you learn about? And this is again for our viewers who are policymakers, when multi-stakeholder approaches hit their limits, and how does that inform your view of, let's just say, at the Paris Declaration, the US and the UK refused to sign the declaration. What should policymakers learn when there are consensus building fails? And
So we have more than 200 countries in the world. I also strongly believe in multi-stakeholder approaches. So you add to that civil society, researchers, companies, you get to very large numbers. It's by design very difficult to get very large numbers of stakeholders to agree on anything. So I believe in specific approaches, coalitions of the willing. That's really what we tried to put forward at the Paris Summit in February of this year. For example, we launched a coalition for sustainable AI. We had about 90 signatories at the time of the summit. This is a completely voluntary, open coalition, open to member states, open to companies, to research centers, international organizations. So 90 such organizations signed at the summit. This continues to exist, and now we have more than 200, almost 300 signatories. We cannot force anyone to sign, but the sheer fact that it exists and that people want to join, I find is a success. The current AI foundation that was launched at the summit, that was again multi-stakeholders, smaller scale in terms of number of partners. I think about 12 countries, large international foundations, companies wanting to put together their efforts and their money towards the development of public interest AI. That was launched, not forcing anyone to join, but making something happen. And the declaration of the summit, as you mentioned, was signed by 60 countries and international organizations. Again, nobody was forced to sign it, but it gives you a very good picture that all European countries, all major developing countries, Brazil, India, China even, were willing to sign a declaration saying that AI should be developed for public interest and taking into account the planet's resources. That's a success in itself, I find.
No, that's, as you said, so many countries, it's sometimes pretty difficult to bring those things together. Talking about the Paris Summit, and you, when I say it was renamed from the AI Safety Summit to the AI Action Summit, what was the thought process behind the change of the name for the summit?
So I guess every country wants to have their own name. India, which will be hosting the summit next February, is calling this the AI Impact Summit. And also it's a technology that moves so fast that at a given moment in time, it's normal to want to focus on different things. Our thought process to choose the word action was that the technology was rapidly developing, was not completely new anymore, but still in its infancy and developing very rapidly. And we believed in wanting to address both the risks and opportunities, that what was the most important thing was the actions we wanted to take, actions to mitigate the risks, and actions to help steer towards the opportunities and the beneficial use cases. So that's how we came up with the word action.
When these experts would disagree fundamentally, and sometimes I'm sure they must have, how do you arbitrate? Again, this is for our listeners, this is a question that came from them. Give us, if you have a specific example of navigating, different expert advice. This is, again, a learning lesson for some of our policy leaders.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, because I was quite keen to have a group of thematic experts and envoy alongside me. I didn't want to lead this alone. There was a team, but in terms of the content, I felt that it was very important to have this group of very bright and very energetic people focusing on different teams. So we had AI and work. Sana, who led that, Sana de Courcelles from the International Labour Organization, bringing the whole expertise on the topic, but also on how you think and talk about work and jobs on an international level. Martin Tisney from AI Collaborative on public interest AI. Guillaume Poupard, a cybersecurity expert on security and trust in AI, Henri Verdier on global governance, the former digital ambassador for France, and Roxane Varza, the lead of Station F, Europe's largest incubator on innovation and ecosystems in general. So that really brought different perspectives on AI. Those are a reality. I mean, AI is so broad and impacts so many things that it's important to have those perspectives. We had regular catch-ups, but we also had one-day workshops a couple of times in the preparation for the summit to discuss things with a mutual respect, listening to each other, and trying to find the way forward. It meant that on some topics we found solutions, and on others we were just going to discuss the topic because we didn't have an answer. If I take the example, for example, of AI and work, there had been very dire predictions, even a year or two before, saying that half of the world's workers would lose their jobs within 2 years. So that prediction had been made 2 years before, and then so we were 1 year after not seeing the beginning of that like 25% reduction. And we agreed that we wouldn't have the definite answer by the summit, but we agreed that we would ask leading economists to come and present the state of research on that. So we had Nobel Economics Prize Daron Acemoglu, we had Eric Brynjolfsson, we have Philippe Aghion, who at the time did not have a Nobel Prize for economics, but has since made sure he had one. He didn't make sure, but he was awarded one. Debate and present the consensus from their works. That was a way to progress the understanding without reaching a definite answer, because things are still in the making.
Sovereign AI is right now a big thing for a lot of countries. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA keeps talking about it also. And you have also advocated for European AI sovereignty, but you also simultaneously and said that you want to promote global cooperation and multi-stakeholder governance. So, for example, when France develops sovereign AI capabilities, does that inherently mean that other countries would have less leverage? How do you resolve the tension between sovereignty and internationalism here?
The first thing is how to define sovereignty, and what I often say is sovereignty doesn't mean that everything has to be done in your own country and you're only going to be using the things that are developed in your own country. That's more autarky, and I don't think many countries, maybe except China and the US, and even I don't think China or the US could completely close their borders and have the same life that they have today. But the smaller countries like France and all the others, certainly that's not possible. So the way I define sovereignty is more the ability to have choices. And to be able to have another definition is you want to be able to have online a digital life that is similar to the physical life that you enjoy in your own country and your own region. In the case of AI, there's a very realistic possibility. I hope it doesn't happen, but there's a very realistic possibility that you get a choice between either a US digital life or a Chinese digital life, and not anything else in between. I think we need to be able to have more choice than that. I lived in the US, I love the US way of life, but I love the French way of life, and I want to be able to enjoy different cultures. When I go to India for the AI Impact Summit, I really look forward to enjoying the Indian way of life, even in the digital world. So that's what I define as sovereignty. It means that every country or region needs to be able to develop their own AI ecosystems and services, which means investment, which means startups, which means local implementation. It also means some sort of regulation. And it also means that we will continue to use services developed in other countries, in particular in the US, in the case of digital solutions, and some Chinese solutions are also being used in a number of countries, and that's part of navigating the international cooperation and the sovereignty.
And shifting gears a little bit, you wrote that the Catholic Church has a unique voice on AI after attending the Vatican's Minerva dialogues. What specifically did theologians say about AI that surprised you? Something you've not heard from Silicon Valley or government officials. This is again for our listeners.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of being invited to these Minerva dialogues for now almost 10 years. It's very unique because it brings together AI experts as well as theologians and long-timers at the Vatican, and people like me who are not linked with the Vatican and not with Silicon Valley, but more really thinking deeply about the field. What is really valuable in any of these gatherings is the discussion between the technical experts and the ethics experts. That's always extremely rich. The reason why I also think even more so today that the Catholic Church has a relevant voice, and I hope that it will use it, is that Pope Leo XIII, the predecessor of current Pope Leo XIV. He was a pope in the late 1800s, 1890s. He wrote a theological paper, an encyclical, on the Industrial Revolution. And that was something that was actually quite specific at the time. It was at the time where there were huge debates between the robber barons on the one side wanting to really appropriate capitalism in a few hands, and workers were almost slaves. And on the other hand, you had people on the communist side saying that private property should be abolished and there shouldn't be any companies. So you had two extremes. And the Catholic Church was able to put forward a path that was at the intersection of both, and that really became the basis for social democracy. They said private property was a good thing. They also say that workers needed to be respected and protected and had a right to have decent conditions for work, things that today we will all say, okay, yeah, that's obvious. But at the time, that wasn't. And at the time of the AI revolution, it would be valuable, I think, to have an institution like the Catholic Church look at things with a lot of, thousands of years of history and experience, and maybe try to say and write something.
Since you brought up, Pope Leo's, 13th Rerum Novarum on industrial labor and today's AI challenges, specifically, what does dignity of labor mean? And when AI can do most cognitive tasks better than humans, is dignity tied to economic productivity, or can it survive automation?
The first thing is, as you very rightly pointed, how do we define dignity and dignity at work? So some of it is intellectual, but not necessarily. I think it is a lot about what value you bring to others and to the world. And that value can be very objective and very subjective as well. So it's what do you bring to society, and how is what you bring being recognized? So there's an element of working with others that is super important, that we need to make sure stays with or without AI. There's also the dignity of being able to live in a decent way based on your job. And so those are also things that you can get directly through your income or through protection from the society around you. And there's a number of elements like that I think we need to think about and further define, and then see how they can be maintained or reinforced in an age of AI.
And you have handed off the AI summit on to India, and you said that 2026 will be the year of French Indian innovation, and France has the regulation, India with its population and others has the scale. Specifically for our listeners who are thinking of attending that summit, what will success look like in Delhi? What's the one commitment you're pushing for that would make the India Summit transformative rather than just incremental?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think I say that France has regulation, and I think France has innovation and regulation, and India definitely has a scale that France doesn't have. And I think that's a great opportunity. India also has, and I very much welcome the focus they're placing on impact, which is about concrete impact to individual people's lives. And last I was in India last month, I was able to see some fascinating examples of, for example, AI being used by, an example is when you cough in front of your smartphone, and through recognition of the sound and then AI analysis of the sound, there's a very simple detection of whether you have tuberculosis or just a cold. And that's extremely valuable and extremely concrete. And I love this example and others that I have seen. So I think the AI Impact Summit is an opportunity to have this focus on concrete impact and use cases, and also on how AI can be both developed and used in more countries than countries in the global north and more developed economies. So going there to see that innovation, I think, is absolutely key, and going there to continue the concrete actions on what can be done for public interest AI. For example, multilingualism, which is a big topic in India, but also in the world. More than 7,000 languages in the world. AI models today go to about 100 when they're really good. That leaves you a lot of space and a lot of opportunity. AI for health. So there's lots of very concrete applications. Even all the way to AI and defense, which is also a very active field for innovation. So I very much look forward to going to India and encourage people to go and attend as well.
So there's something for everybody, according to Anne. So our listeners should definitely check out the Impact Summit. Finally, and if you could send one message back to the 1991 Anne Bouverot defending her AI PhD, knowing she'd eventually organize the largest AI summit in history, what would you tell her?
I think that life is full of opportunities, and that regardless of what you end up doing, I mean, I decided not to continue in research, but I learned a lot of things from that research, both from the field itself and what AI was at the time, but also what it means to be a researcher, what it means to really work on something for years and try to go really, really deep into a topic, which gave me a lot of self-assurance that I would be able to do that on other topics and understand very complex things. And that, maybe time is not completely linear. There's a circular element to time.
And for our listeners, she not only runs, AI governance, but she also runs Europe's biggest TV festival, which for people who don't know that. So, Anne, when AI writes all the scripts, will you regulate it or program it at Series Mania?
So Series Mania, thank you for mentioning this, is the largest international festival for series, TV and platforms. This is where the first ever episode of Succession was shown to the public, and it became a world sensation. I don't believe that AI will be writing the scripts. It will be writing some scripts. If you want to do a sequel to something, you have 15 episodes and you want a sort of do more of the same, it will help. But the reality is it means that creators will be using these tools to help them, maybe in a little bit of a ping pong sense as well, to create new things and also to show them to people who might finance them. For example, immediately, very quickly, with images, with moving images, which you're not able to do today. But it is a very massive revolution for the creative industries. It definitely is.
And thank you so much for sharing your profound insights and your work on the Paris AI Action Summit and your leadership in global AI governance. That really tells us the critical importance of bringing together diverse perspectives, as she's pointed out, technical, diplomatic, ethical, and your emphasis on AI for people, societies, and the planet resonates deeply with our mission at Regulating AI and with our listeners. So thank you for being on the podcast and look forward to continuing the conversation maybe in New Delhi. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you for having me on this podcast. It was really an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.